So having changed the database from being a flat file database just of papers to now being a relational database containing two tables, papers and weeks, what we need to do now is to actually make sure our code will still work. Okay, so we've got to change a number of things because the structure of the database has completely changed. So we'll have to look now in our ASP to get it to work. So let's first of all think of mobile standards ASPX.VB. Okay, and here you can see that here what I'm titling thr.controls.add, sort of tr.controls.add get cell with text db read item open bracket week. That no longer exists in the database. So if we were to call that, that would actually cause an error. So we've got to somehow rewrite this, but also our query itself. Okay, we say here select star from papers. So we're asking for all of the records in the papers table. The thing is, a lot of important data is not only in the papers table, it is also in the weeks table, specifically the week number. So we're going to have to change this query such that we can actually get the week number from the weeks table. Okay. Surprisingly, this is not that difficult a task to do. Okay. We've got here select from papers. If we want to do a very quick way of writing a join between those two tables, the papers table and the weeks table, what we do is select star from papers, comma, weeks. Sorry, wait a minute. Select from papers, comma, weeks. Okay. Now then, I'm just going to make a very simple way of writing the join. There are more sophisticated ways of writing the join, but I'm just going to say select only those occasions where the foreign key ID in the papers table is the same as the ID field in the weeks table. So select star from papers weeks where weeks ID, remember the primary key of the weeks table is the same as the foreign key in the papers table. And the foreign key in the papers table is something like this: papers dot, and this is now the column that replaced what was previously in week. It's going to be week underscore fk underscore id. Sorry, id. Okay. Select star from papers weeks where weeks.id, if you like, the primary key of the weeks table, which just lists a set of numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, is the same as the foreign key in the papers table, and which is called week underscore fk underscore id. Okay, so let's just that will apply to all of these lines. Okay, so let's just copy and paste that. Okay, and just go to the part where order by begins. Okay, and I'll do the same here. And for the final one, it's just going to be the entire, there's no order by select table statement. So it's just going to be select star from papers weeks where weeks ID equals papers.weeks fk ID. Okay, so that's now, we've changed our SQL statements. Okay, and then we need to change what gets displayed. Okay, and the important line is here. TR, remember that's the table row controls add get cell with text. This is going to be a table cell containing this text. dbRead.item week. Now, as I say, that item doesn't exist anymore, but there is a field inside the weeks table which we've joined to, remember, so therefore we can access it, called number. Okay, which is inside the weeks table. We don't have to write weeks dot number because there is only one column called number in both tables, so therefore we don't need to specify which table it's coming from. Okay, so we've got that there. We've put that the number. Okay, and so now what should happen is we should be able to see our table again. Okay, so let's see if we can. So pressing play. This should bring up the web page in exactly the same form as previous. It should look exactly the same, although the logic through which we've obtained the data is totally different. Okay, and it has. Okay, so we've got these kind of numbers here, 3, 3, 4, 4. In the meantime, I've also added another one just to test the whole thing out. So that seems fine. Okay, but let's, if I were to put my mouse over the columns, you can see that if I were to do a sort by author, that should probably work. If I were to sort by title, that would probably work. But almost certainly, if I did a sort by week, it probably would not work. If you look at the very bottom of this video, you'll see something there, a sort equals week. And if you remember, when we were coding the sorting within the list of papers, we passed a parameter, the sort by, which eventually went into our SQL statement. Okay, but we no longer have this week field anymore. So this would be fine here. So because the title field still exists, so order by, sort by, which is title, that will be fine. Sort by author, that will be fine. Sort by week will not be fine. Okay. Now, since it's going to take us more effort than is necessary here, for example, this is the get header cell with text here. If we were to put, remember, cell str is both the visible string which appears in the page, i.e. week, but also the thing that gets passed for sorting. Now, in our case, we would be sorting by a thing called number, not a thing called week, because it's the number field in the weeks table which is now displaying the week number rather than the week field in the papers table. Okay, but here we've got a slight it's going to be slightly complicated because we've got here sort equals a cell str, which is also what the user sees, and if we were to change this to say number, then we'd also see the word number in the page, which we don't really want. Maybe I'm not making myself clear, and if that is the case, let me just help to do so by actually let's actually force that into the thing. So if I changed this word here, week, and this remember the header cell, and I put it in, I replace that with the word number. Okay, you'll see what the problem is. So if I replace that with the word number, which is the true field now, which contains the week, the problem is the way we've created the page so far is that the word number will actually now appear in the page. Okay, because it's used both as a visual thing and as a kind of a logical thing. It's both the visual element, which is, and as you see there now, it says number. Okay, sort, and this would certainly work. So author, title, number. But actually, what we're trying to say is that it occurs in that week. Now, if I press on this, this should actually work. Okay, yes, so it does the sorting. So if I now sort by title, it'll change the order, and now I click by number, it'll work. But ideally, we want the sorting to also work, but that not to say the word number, but to say the word week. Okay, and what I'm going to do to actually resolve that is a slightly ignoble thing, namely a hack. And so while we can use get header cell with text number, what I'm going to do here is change. So I'm going to make a little if statement, which is again not very elegant. Okay, so we are going to pass here week as being the cell str. Okay, h1 text equals cell str. Then immediately afterwards, I'm going to say if cell str equals quote week, then cell str equals number. Okay, and this is horrible, really. This is horrible coding, but it'll help us get us out of this particular little problem right now, such that now I can go back to passing the word week into the header, which will then display in the cell as header, but create a sorting command saying number. Okay, so let's see if that can work. So again, I click Start Debugging. And the page, as per usual, comes up very slowly. So it does say week, but as you can see down the bottom, the actual sort is really by number. Okay, so I'll click on week, and that'll do the sort. It won't cause any problems. There's title, and then I click on week again, and I've sorted again. Okay, so that wasn't too painful, I don't think, changing that particular page to make it work. What potentially could be a much more painful operation is the new article.aspx page. Okay, so let's go back into the code and have a look at that. Remember, in new article, that is where the user has the opportunity to add a new article to the database. Okay, to actually type in the URL, type in the abstract, etc., etc. At the moment, this is again here in the old code. What we have is a little text box called article week. Okay, and this gets put into an insert SQL statement, insert into papers, author title, week, abstract title, hyperlink. Okay, values something, 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 something. Okay, now, instead of actually putting in the actual week number, so suppose something takes place in week 5, instead of putting in the number into the week field, what we have to do is put a reference to the record that contains the number 5 in the weeks table. Okay, but to do that, we need to know what record does indeed contain the number 5 for the number field. Okay, so that is a little bit tricky. Okay, although the solution is not as difficult as it seems, and in fact makes the whole page more user-friendly to use. Namely, what we can do is replace this text box, which has week in it at the moment, and replace it with a drop-down list of possible values driven from the database. Okay, taken from the table weeks. So there's what we currently do. The user currently types in a number representing the week. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is give them a drop-down list of possible week values, which will be referenced to the weeks table in our database. Okay, so first of all what we're going to do is we're going to delete this text field. Okay, we're not going to allow it to type in text anymore. Then what we're next going to do is we're going to have a look in Server Explorer, and we're going to just click on the mobile standards. And just in case you haven't already done so, click on the mobile standards.accdb folder, and then that will give you access to your data. Okay, the data in that particular database. Okay, and then go back into the toolbox. Okay, so we go into View Toolbox, and now instead of where the week text box used to be, drag in a drop-down list. Okay, so I drag in a drop-down list. Okay, and here I get the option I can actually choose a data source. If you remember what the little kind of thing we did with the grid view in the previous chapter, now we're going to do just a simple drop-down list box. So I choose data source. Okay, so click on choose data source, and it gives me choose a data source. So I click new data source. Okay, choose database. Okay, rather than access database, because for some reason that refers to the previous version of access. So we have to use database itself here. So I specify an ID for your data source, and in fact I'm going to call it just weeks. Weeks ID, something like that. That should be fine. Okay, it can be anything. Okay, which data collection should I use? We'll use mobile standards, ACCDB. Okay, and I click next. Do I want to save the connection string? No, it's not necessary. So I click next. And now I'm given, I'm asked, what do you want to show? And the answer is, I want to show data from the weeks table. I want to give the user the possibility of choosing any one of the values which are currently in the weeks table. Okay, so in that case, what I'm going to choose is topic we just added as a convenience. Well, don't bother with that. Just choose ID and number. Okay. Now it's not. We're not going to actually see the ID, but all that we are doing here is trying to get those values down into the page for the next thing. Okay. So let's just do a test query at this point, which will show us yes, we've got it. So you see, these are all the records. Okay, there's the ID. So like the very first record in that table has the value 3 in the number field. The second record in that table has the value 4 in the number field. The third record in that table has the value 5 in the number field. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, and if you click finish, this is not the end, by the way. There's still a few more little things to do. And what we're going to do now, this is a very, very, very nice thing. Okay. We choose one field which the user will see, which is quite obviously going to be the number field. But what the value the user will be sending into the papers table whenever they put in a new record is going to be the ID of the weeks table, not the number. Okay. Such that therefore what they will be putting in is a reference to the record in the weeks table which contains that number. Okay, so if I click OK, what I've done there is now I've got my drop down list is bound, okay, is bound to the weeks table of the database. So instead of the user typing in a field now, the user will be given a list of possible values that they can choose. Okay, which will have come from the weeks table. Okay, so that's the first thing we've got to do. Okay, we've done that. The second thing now we've got to do is amend the SQL statements here, because at the moment what we're putting in is direct values into the what used to be the week field. Okay, in the papers table. So now what we need to put is not the week field because it doesn't exist anymore, but the field we've replaced it by, which is week underscore FK underscore ID. Okay, so this is what we're going to be inserting a value, okay, into there, which is not going to be the actual number of the week, but a reference to the weeks table, to the record which contains the number of the week. Okay. And just as we put that in here, we're going to also have to change the command parameters add with value. Here we're going to put in this is the value, this is the field we want to change, and the value, okay, is no longer from a text field called article week. It's actually from the drop down list we created. Okay. Now the drop down list we didn't actually give it a name, so therefore Visual Studio itself gave it a name, and the name it's got is drop down list 1. Okay, so that is the name of the drop down list 1, but it's drop down list 1 dot. Now remember when we were setting this up, we said that one thing is something that the user is going to see, okay, and that ultimately is the text. Okay, but what we want it to return is the value, and that for each of those visible things the user sees, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, when the user chooses that, what they will in fact be choosing, the data they will in fact be sending into the database is not that number, but is actually the number of the record in the weeks table which contains that number. Okay, so that's the drop down list. So there it is, drop down list dot selected value. Okay, so we've changed the SQL, and I think that is everything. So let's now see if we can indeed use the new article.aspx page to put in a new article in this new relational database that we've created. Okay, so let's run new article. As per usual, it takes a while to come up on my machine. Now, as you see, we've got our drop-down list here, and it's given me every available possible week value from the weeks table. Okay, so I'm just going to type in just to make it just ZZZZZ, title XXXXX, and URL http://www.hearts.ac.uk, comments none, abstract none. Okay, so we've done all that. Here's a moment of truth. Will this actually work? We click on add article entry to database, and it seems to have. Let's just reload it, because sometimes that page doesn't appear straight away. And there it is, the very end. There's our field. Okay, XXXX. We've chosen it to appear in week 3. Okay, and let's just reorder it by week, such that it should now appear nearer the top, I think, or should it, or does it work or not? Oh dear, there's a problem, I think, with the sorting. The sorting is not exactly perfect at the moment. Okay, so let's just add another one. Okay, so like let's add another article. So new article ASPX, and let's just try TTT URL, again HTTP, or just hearts.ac.uk. This time I'll make it week 8, comments, abstract. Okay, so now I click add entry to database. Okay, and that should have put that at the end of the date. Now I have to refresh again. So I refresh, and that has added this into the database. But the sorting is not working perfectly at the moment. But in fact, the problem is not too hard to find, because if we look in the display table function within Mobile Standards ASPX.VB, we see that there is the case statement was sort by. And remember now, instead of sorting by title, author, and week, we're sorting by title, author, and number. So we need to change week into number, okay, which I will do right now. So week should become number, and then we have the sort by being passed to this page anyway. So now, having done that, what should happen is that this should now work, hopefully. So now we should be seeing the list of papers, and in the list of papers there will be the options to sort by author, title, or potentially by week, and now that is correct. So 3334478. So that is now totally working.